Me and my friends were all getting prepared for the biggest meal of the year. It was the eve of Thanksgiving. Winnie the Pooh and his pals were making space for the out-of-town guests that were coming to stay at my fishing cottage this Thanksgiving week. Tigger and Chip and Dale were betting on what pies would be served for dessert, and Goofy and Pete were cutting the vegetables. Hours later, Donald and Scrooge McDuck were just about to put the finishing touches on the streamers when there was a knock at the front door. Donald looked out the living room window and saw all the cast from the animated feature canon. Each and every one of the cast placed their sleeping bags, toiletries, and even their suitcases in the basement. It was a tight fit, but at least it was enough to leave enough room for everyone to enjoy their Thanksgiving week stay at my cottage. Rabbit, Owl, and Chip and Dale were barbecuing hamburgers and hot dogs for dinner, and they all got eaten before the sun went down. That night, touched about how bad the gang and I were feeling about the way our creator's company is now, who should come over for dessert but an old big fan of ours, Leslie Anderson, a Baptist pastor who served in Oklahoma for 3 decades. He used to send fan letters to us once a month every year in his youth. He came with his daughter and granddaughter. As we all got into our pajamas, we all gathered into the living room, and he told us the biggest bedtime story that his grandfather told him when he was a child.
Once upon a time, underneath the surface of the earth, there was an unearthly enchanted country called Tassalasia. In many ways, it was like any other enchanted country. This country had 13 kingdoms, and they all had castles, villages, farms, meadows, and forests that look enchanted, even stately chateaus and mansions where the upper class lived. Their sun shined very clear during the day, and the sky was blue as tulips, and at night its moon glowed like a blue diamond, and the stars glowed like gems of different colors. About a population of over 810,000 people lived in that country, and a population of 340,000 mer people lived under the water, in the underwater country next to it. The animals and underwater amphibians could not only make their noises, but they could also talk, and talk with the people and the mer people. But there were no hunting weapons or fishing rods in their possessions. There was no need for any. On the night of the beginning of a new month, while the people were asleep, there were portals in each kingdom that would open and bring in all kinds of prepared raw meat for the butchers to carry to their shops, and prepare them for their customers, and for the upper-class people, even the royal families, for their party banquets. Their means of traveling were carriages pulled by horses and deer, and magical flying unicorns with fairy wings, and magic carpets. Each kingdom was peaceful, prosperous, and rich in romance and tradition. Most of the people were good, but some looked good, but were secretly evil. But no matter what the people had in their lives, they were never lonely, and they were never led astray. They had guardians. The guardians of the good people were fairies, pixies, wizards, and genies. The guardians of those who were secretly evil were witches and black magic sorcerers and evil genies. And underwater, the mer people had guardians which were known as sea magicians and sea sorcerers. Across the country of Tassalasia were 2 other countries. One was known as the Lesbi Outlands, where all who were secretly evil were banished to. If any royal servants of the king and queens of the kingdom found out that any of the kingdom's subjects were secretly cruel to their blood relatives, or their servants, especially if their servants were blood relatives, or if any of the kingdom's subjects were secretly making conspiracy, especially if a conspirator was an upper-class individual, they would be put on ships heading for the Lesbi Outlands and would remain there for the rest of their lives. But most of all, those who had been abused and humiliated were never mean in return, because they dreamed of the day their dreams of happiness would come true, even if it was a commoner who was destined to marry a royal and live happily ever after. The other country was known as Mazaroma, where humanoid red people and creatures lived. Unlike Tassalasia, Mesoroma was filled with mature, contented, and inappropriate practices and immoralities that wise people knew were not cool. The people there were never even allowed in Tassalasia because of the customs they withheld in their minds and hearts. If any vicious individual such as pirates, dark soldiers, or dark knights, or other evil individuals that appeared out of nowhere and attacked the kingdoms, the magical guardians would arm the kings and queens' military with any weapons necessary to drive them away, and the guardians also used their powers afterwards. Traditions varied in the kingdoms. In one kingdom one night a ball was arranged in honor of the king's youngest daughter's 18th birthday. All the maidens, little and big, dressed in their finest gowns, and the boys and men all wore the finest suits. After a few dances with upper-class people, a poor husbandman's youngest son, dressed in a suit that glowed like diamonds, approached unexpectedly, and the young princess danced with him for the remainder of the night and fell in love. And then days later, they became engaged afterwards. In another kingdom one day, a duke invited the whole village he lived by to a picnic he arranged. The picnic took place in the kingdom's meadow close to a sparkling waterfall next to an enchanted river. The servants prepared special fruit punch and terrific sandwiches. The children frolicked around and picked flowers for their families and friends. A bushel of candy completed the entire party. One night in another kingdom, one of the kingdom's favorite stories was being performed at the village theater. The costumes were unique, the action was exciting, and the night was filled with laughter and smiles, making the performance successful, and the performers got paid well because the performance was a sellout. In one of the kingdoms in the underwater country one day, the mer people gathered in the mer count's ball house for an exciting performance. After collecting the most talented mer boys in the country, they were brought before the mer people of the kingdom to perform an amazing musical performance for them. A dessert reception finished their day. The Anti-Immorality Task Force of Tassalasia had a rather unlikely job for an anti-immorality task force. They were a secret organized workforce of elves, goblins, ogres, trolls, beasts, and dragons. Their job was to make sure that the country of Tassalasia and the underwater country next to it stayed free of things and stuff that some good people thought were cool, but was inappropriate that other good people know is wrong. If anyone was caught attempting to do such things, or was caught in the act red-handed, they would be catapulted into the portal that led to the real world, instead of being put on ships that went to the Lesbia Outlands. They would also give notices to the people of Tassalasia that were warnings to the friends and families of those who committed such immoral acts. If any person or creature from Mesoroma set foot in any kingdom in Tassalasia or the underwater country, they would be chained and shipped back to their country and given a warning to never return. Life in that unearthly enchanted country was colorful, perfect, and magical until the king of one of the kingdoms died and passed his crown onto his eldest son. And this newly crowned king had a sneaky ambition to drive away the magical happiness and perfection that the country endured for centuries. In one kingdom, the servants of the new king from one of the kingdoms passed on whispering lies about the fact that the king and queen were abusing their power and not treating their subjects fairly. In another kingdom, the servants of the new king from one of the kingdoms encouraged certain people that it was okay to commit immoralities if they didn't get caught. And in another kingdom, the servants of the new king from one of the kingdoms bribed the high-class people to allow festivals and parties that were abominations to the good people that know is wrong. And in another kingdom, the servants of the new king from one of the kingdoms disguised and posed as magical guardians and tracked down every individual who was cruelly being treated like a servant and made to do all the work, and put encouraging words to rebel against their mistresses and masters. Some of them did, but the rest resisted, stating they would rather wait patiently for their dreams to come true than be rude and be enslaved for the rest of their lives. On a coastal village of Mesoroma, the servants of the new king from one of the kingdoms gave out false messages that all the kingdoms in Tassalasia abolished their laws, that the people and creatures were not allowed in their country. They also spread lies that the previous monarchs abused their power and ran their kingdoms like dictatorships.